Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Deeply Rooted. I'm Jeremiah Reiner, your host, and this is episode 94. We're actually going to be doing a pastor profile episode today, so we're excited about this conversation. You all know the routine. Make sure you go on over to our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and leave us a review. That helps us out tremendously in getting the word out about Deeply Rooted. Don't forget to find us on our Facebook group page, and you can go on over to our website at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You'll see all the archived episodes, our blog posts are on there, and our upcoming ministry schedule as well. You can find all that again at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. Now, today we're really excited, like I said, about the conversation. Sitting here, actually in home with this gentleman, so he's kind enough to let us in to his house. But Rob Dykes, who's the senior pastor of Westminster Presbyterian Church here in Kingsport, Tennessee. Rob's a native of Scotland, actually, and he's served in ministry since 2013 in Wales and also now here in the United States. He's married to his lovely wife, Ashley. They've got 2 children, and Rob actually earned his MDiv at Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Greenville, South Carolina, where he met his wife. And according to his bio on the church website, I had to do some digging here, and I want to say this as it says. He enjoys, quote, chocolate, reading, the outdoors. I love how this is in quotations, soccer, and golf. So, Rob, thank you for being on the podcast, brother.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to hit the hardest question first, and this is what I've been waiting to ask. How was your golf game this last year?
Ooh, well, I'm enjoying the American courses.
Okay.
Golf is better in America.
And why is that?
Well, the golf courses in Britain, or at least where I'm from, it's more links.
Right.
And so the grass is up to your knees, and you hit it in the rough, and your ball is gone.
Yeah.
So over here you have golf carts, and everything's so manicured, and it's so much better. And the weather, of course.
I was sort of say the season's probably much longer here.
Oh, so much better. The word we use in Scotland is dreek, grey and drizzly.
Gotcha.
And it's so much better over here. Love golf over here.
Well, I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, let's go back a little bit and get sort of your background for everybody, because I'm assuming a lot of people that are going to listen to this are probably not familiar with you, and that's just simply because, maybe knowing our podcast, maybe not be familiar. And certainly you're new to America, so to speak, as far as the number of years you've been here. But talk to us a little bit about growing up in Scotland. What was that like, and what are your memories there?
Yeah, so I was born in Stirling, which is where the Scots quite famously
William Wallace
beat the English.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So Robert the Bruce and Wallace, the Wallace monuments there. So it's, but growing up in Scotland, it's a very spiritually dark place.
Wow.
I mean, just really spiritually dark, very secular. You really are swimming against the tide in Scotland. Very, very spiritually dark. So it was a lonely place to grow up as a Christian, except for my brothers. I don't really recall having many Christian friends. I mean, you really have to stand out if you're a faithful Christian.
So your family pretty spiritually growing up? I mean, you guys were in church often, I guess?
Yeah, we were brought up in the Brethren. My father was a lay preacher, and so our theology is very different, but my father's a very godly man.
Right.
I love him a lot. So we had a solid home, and we were faithfully taken to church. But in terms of the wider society, and in terms of my upbringing in the public schools there, it was definitely a very godless place.
What were you like, outside of school? Did you play sports? Did you get into any other hobbies, I guess?
It was church, school, and golf, basically, for the first 16 and 17 years of my life until we moved to Wales. That was my life, church, school, and golf.
Now, I'm a geography teacher, so I want you to help us out here for our audience. Explain Scotland, Wales, United Kingdom, sort of the whole geographic, because I think a lot of people are not familiar with how that works, not just geographically, but governmentally as well.
Right. So Great Britain is Scotland, England, and Wales.
Right.
So you've got Scotland, just south of Scotland, you've got England.
Scotland in the northern half.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
to understand, right?
And then sort of the western edge of England is Wales.
Okay.
Wales is very small country. I think it's got 3 million people, 9 million sheep.
Yeah.
Just very agricultural, beautiful,
Right.
undiscovered place. And then add to that Northern Ireland and you would have the United Kingdom. So it's
Right.
Great Britain plus Northern Ireland is the United Kingdom.
Now, Scotland, independent country.
No, it's not. We actually had the opportunity to vote for independence.
Right.
I think it was back in 2014, and we said no. We wanted to stay part of
Right.
Britain.
So still in the Parliament, still members there.
So yeah, we're ruled from London. We do have a Parliament, but it doesn't have a lot of power. You
Sure.
know. So yeah.
Now, what do you remember about your church upbringing? Were you really involved there, or was that more, hey, I'm here, I'm sitting, I'm listening, and I'm going home?
Yeah, it really wasn't until we moved to Wales when I was about 16, 17 that the Lord really started taking a hold of me. I mean, I think I was a believer growing up. I don't really remember not trusting in Christ as my Saviour and believing the Bible, etc. But it really wasn't until we moved to Wales when the Lord really grabbed me and began to study more. I found sermon audio, started listening to sermons almost on a daily basis, started doing mission trips, started my own little Christian union in school. So really that's when the Lord took a hold of me by His grace, and I started, I'd woken up, as it were, spiritually, and began to follow in earnest. So.
Now, what was the reason for the move to Wales?
So my mother's Welsh, my father's Scottish, and we moved really to look after my Welsh grandparents.
Gotcha.
And so we lived in this little seaside town called Porthcawl. My dad was a headmaster there, so he was actually my headmaster as well, so I had to behave myself. But yeah, just a lovely little seaside town. It really is a beautiful country,
right.
And it wasn't hard to move from Scotland to Wales.
Now, when you graduated high school, did you go to college there in Wales?
Yeah, I went to university, and then after I graduated, I ended up moving to London.
Okay.
I was a graphic and web designer, and I went to work there in London just to sort of kickstart my career, but the plan was always to move back to Wales. And when I was there, I actually got to... So I was working for a Christian organisation doing other design work. And when I was there, I actually got to live above a church for free.
Wow.
If I ran their youth group. I don't know if any of the listeners will be familiar with Wimbledon, where the tennis is.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so that's where I was, and so twice a week I would run this youth group. One night I would do just play soccer with the boys, but then the Friday I started teaching, and that was really my introduction to ministering to others.
Yeah.
And the kids were from terrible backgrounds, gangs, knives, drugs, all the rest of it.
Is that the lay there in Wimbledon? Is that sort of the norm?
Actually, Wimbledon is one of the nicer parts of London, so I'm not sure why that.
Right.
I mean, but these kids were coming and just terrible backgrounds, and it was really then. So by this point, I was about 22, 23 years old. I started feeling a desire to go into the ministry. But I didn't really want to. I just wanted to serve the Lord in that way. I wanted to be a minister without going into the ministry, I guess. But I prayed that if that's what the Lord wanted, that He would open the door. But I didn't pursue it.
Right.
And so within a year, I moved back to Wales. I got my sort of dream job in my hometown as a graphic and web designer. I was going to marry this girl, sorted, that was it as far as I was concerned. And I started designing for some local churches as well. And I met a pastor, and I told him about my desire to go into the ministry. And I was thinking, when I'm older, wiser, right. I was only 23, just one day I had this burden to go into the ministry or to be a minister. And he said, go now, while you're young and you don't have commitments and all the rest of it. And I said, well, where do you recommend? And he said, Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary in South Carolina. I said, America? And he's like, yes. He knew it was, for various reasons, he knew about this seminary. And my instant response was no. I was, like I say, I got my job, going to marry this girl. Right. And he said, pray. And by this point, we'd got to know each other and had a more solid relationship. And he told me to pray about it. So for the next few weeks, I did. And in the meantime, he contacted a Welshman who's now actually a pastor in, is it Raleigh or Raleigh?
Raleigh.
Raleigh, North Carolina.
That's how we would say, yeah.
Raleigh. Right, okay.
Yeah.
And this graduate got in touch with the seminary, and they were actually looking for a graphic and web designer. And, they'd waive all my fees and pay me a salary. And it was one of those situations in London. I hadn't pursued the ministry. I just prayed, Lord, if you want me in the ministry, open the door. And I really felt like that was the Lord saying, right, you over there, get in it. And so that was it. I quit my job. I finished with my girlfriend. I basically said to her, I'm not going to ask you to wait for me for 4 years, and she didn't volunteer to do it. So my friends and I, we drove up to Scotland and jumped in Loch Ness to look for the Loch Ness Monster. That was sort of our last goodbye for a time. And
assuming you didn't find him.
I did not. But that was it. Within a matter of months, I was studying in South Carolina.
So, and everybody's going to understand this, that's listening to this. You didn't just come to America, you came to the South, which very unique. Was there a lot of culture shock when you got here?
A wee bit, I think part of it is I was just sort of, just completely enveloped by this seminary, but yeah, I did like it. I didn't have a good attitude, really. I liked the lifestyle, I liked the weather, I liked the seminary, I liked my church, and obviously that's where I met my wife, right. So that was a plus. But I wanted to get home, and so I didn't have the best attitude. It was kind of like, let's tick this seminary box. I wanted to get back to Wales, so...
What was your first impressions of America?
It was big. I don't know. Very different. It's just different. It's hard to explain, really. Just the mindset.
Sure.
I don't know. Just different, really. I did feel like I was a fish out of water. People were friendly. I loved, Southerners were really friendly.
Yeah, pretty typical when I meet a lot of people, obviously not from America, that's sort of the MO. It's always, hey, the Southern people are very friendly, but it's different.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily what America portrays to the world. It's not the South. It's usually the New Yorks and the Los Angeles and the Chicagos and places like that. So a lot of smaller Southern towns, and not that Greenville is extremely small, but it's small enough. It's not exactly what we portray to the world, so I could see why people may think a little bit differently when they first land in the South. And What was church like? I'm sure that was sort of a different vibe altogether.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. I mentioned before that when I was about 17, I discovered sermon audio, and there was one preacher in particular, a chap called Alan Cairns, who I listened to, as I say, almost on a daily basis, and he's Northern Irish, but I knew he was a minister in America. And so when I found out I was going to Greenville Seminary, I Googled his church, and it was 7 miles away from the seminary. And so I thought, right, that's it. That's what church I'm going to. And so when I got there, I kind of felt like I was already part of the church. Not that I stopped going to church in Wales. I had my own home church. But I'd been listening to their ministry from the other side of the Atlantic for 5 or 6 years, and actually that's where I met my wife. So it was quite interesting. We've been listening to the same preaching from different sides of the Atlantic for about 5 years. So
I mean, literally the Lord there working on both ends. That's impressive. Yeah. So what year was that you met your wife there?
2000. I moved over late 2009.
Okay.
We went on our first date February 2010, and by the end of the year we were married.
Where was your first date?
We went to a little cafe called Spill the Beans, just in downtown Greenville. So I invited her for a cup of tea, and she came.
Which, for those who are not listening right now, I also got the pleasure of a cup of tea today. So that was my first exposure to that. And it's good, by the way. So I want to commend you on that. That was really good.
Oh, thank you. Well, the stereotype is true. British people do have bad teeth. And I think I put it down to the amount of tea we drink. So.
I could see that, yeah. Well, I can say that about myself, about the amount of soda that I drink. So, don't feel so bad. But how long before you guys were married?
So February to November.
Wow.
Yeah, didn't mess around.
So you lured her right in, and she just could not say no.
Well, she kept looking over at me from the other side of the sanctuary, and I felt like I had to do something about it. So, but she's a lovely girl. So I married a Southerner. So I guess my children are half American. So. Was
it the accent that lured her in?
She did say that she was attracted to me before she'd heard me speak. So, but yeah, the novelty is worn off for her. She doesn't even think about it. So.
Now you guys have 2 kids, right? Boy and a girl.
Yeah, we do. So after I graduated from seminary, we moved back to Wales.
Okay.
And I actually served in the church of where that pastor had told me about Greenville. And I was there just over 3 years.
Now, what role did you have there?
I was the intern pastor.
Okay.
But I was preaching, almost every week and doing visitation. So it felt more like I was an assistant.
Yeah.
And so we were there just over 3 years, and that's where we had our little boy.
Okay.
His name is, I call him Bertie, but the Americans cut out the E and changed the T to a D, and so it's like Birdie. Birdie. So he was born there, and while we were there, my wife had endless visa problems. We kept getting separated. She ended up coming back to the States and getting her old job back. And she loved Wales. Wales was just a wonderful place. It went well at the church. But the visa problems just seemed never ending.
Right.
And then obviously having our little boy, we kind of got to the point where it's like, enough is enough. And so I ended up coming to the States, and that's where we had our little American girl. So we called her Gwyneth, a good Welsh name, just to sort of make up for her lack of Welshness.
Now, do either of those have an accent?
Oh, they're both American.
Okay.
Yeah. I kept both of them on Peppa Pig, and a bunch of other British television programs. But it was almost with our boy, almost in a matter of weeks. It just snap, he just went from a sort of generic to a, I used to let him watch this program called Fireman Sam, and with a matter of weeks, it just changed. It was Fireman Sam, like Sam instead of Sam. But we've had the wars, over garage versus garage and pants versus trousers, and so. But no, they sound American.
Now, has your wife got any Southern lingo that you just don't really understand, or?
No, I mean, we've been married a good while. I think 11 years. So we get each other.
Yeah. How do you balance family and ministry now? I mean, 2 kids. You're still young. You're full time. I mean, is that something that wears on you from time to time, making sure that you spend adequate time with family and?
Yeah, I think by God's grace, I get the balance. We walk our dog as a family every day, so that's an hour.
Yeah.
We do family worship. We try to do that every day, so we've got that time together. And then our wee boy is homeschooled. So I was actually listening to an American chap from Colorado who's very big in the homeschooling community. His name's Kevin Swanson, and he said something, or he wrote something that struck me, which was, until the Industrial Revolution, a son would have been with his father, whether it be in the carpenter shop or out in the field.
That's true.
And so his mentality was, unless there was a good reason for it not to be the case, he was going to keep his son close by him. And so I try and do that. Sometimes I'll do a visitation and I'll take him, or if we're helping someone in the church move house, he'll come along and help. He's only 5,
right.
But I try and have that mentality. If I'm just going to run out and do some errands, or even just doing the bulletins at the church office, just take him along with me. So I think that's helpful, just to have the kids around as much as I can. But by God's grace, I think we've got the balance okay. Like I say, family worship and walking the dog. If nothing else, we have that time together.
Yeah. How would you classify your style of preaching?
That's a tricky one. I think good preaching informs the intellect, moves the emotions, and challenges the will. And so that's what I try to do. It's not just a download of information to the intellect.
It's not a running commentary.
No, yeah. and so it should move the emotions and challenge the will. And so, I think in sermon preparation, if my emotions aren't moved, or if my will isn't challenged, then there's something wrong. And so I think just preparing my sermons, I'm preaching first and foremost to myself. And if I've been moved by it, then there's a possibility, by God's grace, obviously it's dependent upon the Holy Spirit.
Right.
But I try not to just prepare intellectual sermons. I want people's emotions to be moved and their will challenged. I think probably the biggest influence on me, maybe a couple of men who all happen to be Scottish, and that's not by design, it just worked out that way. But Sinclair Ferguson.
Oh, yeah.
I love his preaching style. He's very conversational.
Right.
And I like that. I'm less so than that, but if I could, I would. But it's just not my style. But I love his preaching. There's another Scotsman whose name is Ian Hamilton, and he's just a wonderful preacher. So I think their influence upon me, I don't know, maybe has affected my preaching. I'm not sure.
Anybody in America that stands out to you that you look pretty highly on?
Yes, mainly Baptists, actually, even though I'm a Presbyterian minister. I think Paul Washer,
Sure.
John Piper, obviously R.C. Sproul, the Lord's called him home. He was a very good preacher as well. So yeah, there's definitely some good American preachers. Neil Stewart and others. He's Irish, but he's in America. But yeah, there's some good American. Voddie Baucham. There's some good American preachers.
What's the best advice you've ever got from somebody about preaching?
About preaching, I don't know. I'm not sure.
What about ministry in general? Like anything stick out to you that you thought, man, that's gold?
Yeah, when I moved to America, the chap who I was succeeding in Charlotte, North Carolina, he sent me this big list of things that were part of my job description. Like, this is what you do with the young adults, and here's some advice when you're organising the men's retreat, etc., etc. But then he just had this paragraph at the bottom to the effect of, you need to do your job, but what's far more important is who you are. And that actually quite struck me. I can do all these things, and obviously there's a lot going on in the ministry, and it's a very demanding calling, but actually more important is who I am. I need to be walking with the Lord. I need to be more and more like Christ. That's more important than making sure my inbox is clear or however many visitations. Obviously visitation is important, counselling, etc. But I need to be a godly man, and that's so yeah, I would say that, just his advice, be more astute, I guess, be more careful as to who you are than anything else, as opposed to what you do in the job. So.
I always like to ask this question to guys when we do these pastor profiles, but do you remember the first message you ever preached?
I do. I preached in a Presbyterian church in South Carolina actually the first time I ever preached was in Italy on a mission trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I had a translator. But the first time my seminary days where I felt like I was going out, as a lamb to be slaughtered, was at a Presbyterian church, and I preached on the thief and the cross. And sometimes when you're preaching, you want the ground to swallow you up, and you sort of feel like you're sweating, and then other times it's like skateboarding downhill. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it's like you can feel the power of the Holy Spirit going out from you. It's almost like you're just listening, you're just there, but it's the Spirit speaking through you. And that happened, actually, as I preached on the thief and the cross, and it was just a wonderful feeling, which, when that happens, and it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's a wonderful feeling just to feel this. It can only be described as the power of the Holy Spirit just flowing out of you. You're just an empty vessel, of course, but to feel that is a wonderful experience, and that happened.
What's your favorite part of ministry?
I love all of it. I love visiting the old ladies. I love preaching. I love teaching. So I love all of it. I think probably the biggest challenge for me is counselling. We had a very brief training in counselling in seminary, and that really didn't bother me because that's a transatlantic difference. In Britain, your marriage could be falling apart, or you could be in the throes of depression, And you wouldn't necessarily think, I'll go to my pastor. It's just really not part of the British mentality. I don't know if it's part of our identity or it's just the way it is in the church. One of the big influences, massive influence on the church in Britain, was Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And his mentality was, sit under the ministry of the word, and there you go. And so he wasn't big on counselling. If you were really struggling, after the evening service, pop by his office, but he wasn't. And so this is a big generalisation, but that's not really as much part of the warp and woof of ministry in Britain. But in America, it seems that people are a lot more open. If there's a young man who's struggling with pornography, he'll go to his pastor.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I think that's the way it should be. I think Americans do that better, a more transparent way of dealing with their sin, with their marriages, with whatever. And that's good and that's healthy. But when I came over to the States, I felt like I was lacking there. And actually I ended up auditing some classes in counselling at RTS in Charlotte. And that's been helpful. But I think that's one of the areas that I need to grow more in, is counselling people. I do premarital counselling, and that's been a good learning curve. But, if someone were to come to me with PTSD, for example, or some of those pastoral things that needed extensive counselling, I feel like that's an area that I need to grow in.
How did you find your way to Westminster?
So I was serving at a church in Charlotte, and I was the assistant pastor there. And I was only preaching, I worked it out 18 times a year. I got to do some pulpit supply, but I was able to teach, and I had my own Sunday school class, etc., etc. I had a men's Bible study. But I didn't have a lot of preaching, and I was sort of coasting a wee bit, and it was nagging at me, but I loved the church so much, I sort of suppressed it. And then something happened. The pandemic came along, and so my Sunday school and my Bible study were sort of stripped from me. And at the same time, I started reading. There's two books in particular. It was the Life and Diary of Andrew Bonar, who's a wonderful Scotsman. Yeah. And his friend, the Life and Diary of Robert Murray McShane.
Another great Scot.
Yes, yes. And both of them, their earnestness in preaching and desire to preach at every opportunity, and just they had something that I didn't have. I felt like I was coasting, but here were two men who lived to preach God's word, to preach the gospel, to see the lost saved, and just the pouring out of themselves. And those two books, at the same time as the pandemic stripping some of my responsibilities, I just felt like this can't go on. And so really it was a desire to preach, to be poured out as a living sacrifice, to be stretched for the sake of the kingdom, that I felt like I reluctantly I need to move on. And so I contacted some people, including one of my professors, who got in touch with Westminster, and they ended up calling me here. So it's been a year and 1 week that I've been at Westminster, and thankful that the Lord has brought me here.
Now, there was a little bit of a transition period there when you got there. Talk a little bit about how, and I want to get his name right here, Pastor Brent Bradley was there, and I believe still there with you guys. Is that correct?
Yes. You hear horror stories in seminary of pastors staying on, and Brent Bradley, my predecessor, was there 38 years, right. And so, you know, you had to wonder, you know, like, how's that going to go? Because he still worships with his, right. You know, that's been his life. And, you know, so there was that curiosity, for lack of a better word, of how's this going to go? And I have to say to you, he has been actually one of the biggest blessings of coming to Westminster. Just a very godly, humble man. He's been so careful. You know, he'll say to me, Rob, I want you to know that I'm here for you, but I'm not looking over your shoulder. But I want you to know I'm here for you, but I'm not looking over your shoulder. And he's been a mentor. I view him as a mentor. And sometimes, you know, we'll do some visitations together. But he has been absolutely wonderful at just being able to step aside and yet at the same time be an encouragement to me. It couldn't have went any better. Right. And honestly, he's a mentor to me, and he has been such a blessing. He really has.
Now, for those that might be interested to live in the Kingsport area, I always want to make sure that we do this. How can folks be a part of Westminster? Like, where are you guys located? Like, times of service, online presence? What can you tell us about that?
So we're located at 900 Watauga Street, so not far away from downtown Kingsport.
Right.
We have Sunday school at 10 for all ages. There's, you know, classes and
right.
Catechism classes and so forth. Worship service is at 11, and then the evening service is at 6 p.m. We are on sermon audio, and we have a YouTube channel as well. Those are live streamed as well. I'm a wee bit biased, but it's a good church.
Yeah.
We have, I'd say we're probably about 200 people, and, you know, the Lord is blessing the church. I think we had about 30 new members last year. And it really is, you know, I tell people the church is not a social club. We're there first and foremost to worship God. And that's what Westminster is all about. It's the worship of God. It's the preaching and teaching of the word. And yet at the same time, you see in the book of Acts, you know, that they had everything in they were part of the fabric of each other's lives. They were opening up their homes in hospitality. They were encouraging each other. They were I hate the expression, maybe hate's a strong word, I dislike the expression, but they were doing life together.
I figure that's
but I see that at Westminster by God's grace, this family, a sense of family and being part of each other's lives. And so it seems to me that by God's grace, and it is of course by God's grace, that it's a healthy church in that regard, and that sense of family as we come and worship together. And you know, we don't have a youth group, or, you know, we do have a women's Bible study and a monthly men's book club. But we, you know, throughout the year, there's just things going on, you know, whether it's, you know, fellowship, or, you know, sometimes even things like paintball, or, you know, whatever, you know, but there's that sense of doing life together.
Now, you guys also operate a small school there as well, I think. Is that?
Yes. It's not a Westminster school.
Right.
We like, we're not exclusively, you know, we don't say thou must homeschool your children, but we like to see parents homeschool their kids. There's perhaps maybe some kids that go to Christian schools, and that's fine. But we don't really view education is the church's role, first and foremost. It's the parents' role. And so it's not a Westminster school per se, but we do host or accommodate homeschooling classes with various co-ops and Graham College, and so our building is used for homeschooling classes, but it's not Westminster school,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the hardest part, and I know you've been waiting on this. So we always like to do this. And of course, you've been told up front that we're going to do it, but we always like to do rapid fire questions just for people to get to know you a little bit better, but also understand, and we joked about this before, like to let people know, hey, this is a real guy. And there are things that he likes and dislikes in life. He's not some, superhero that puts on a suit on Sundays and just walks on water, so to speak. But there's 10 of them, so are you ready?
No.
So that's a yes. All right, okay. So here we go. Rapid fire, just a quick answer or two will suffice. So here we go. Number 1, what's your favorite movie?
Braveheart. I don't know if I should confess to that. There's some adult material in it, but otherwise Braveheart.
Braveheart, okay. What's your lowest golf score?
83.
Okay. Favorite passage of Scripture?
It's got to be Romans 8.
Okay.
Favorite verse is 1 Timothy 1:15, but passage, it's got to be Romans 8.
Gotcha. Do you prefer winter or summer weather?
Summer.
Soccer player, who's your favorite?
Gareth Bale, plays for Wales and Real Madrid.
Okay.
When he's not injured.
I think I know the answer to this, but coffee or tea?
Insulting. I won't answer that.
I love this question. What's the strangest or maybe most unique place that you've ever preached?
I've preached in mainland Europe a few times with a translator.
Okay.
But probably in South Carolina, I preached outside for the first time, and it was a windy day, and I couldn't really use my notes because they'd blow away. And actually, at that point, I hadn't memorized the Nicene Creed. And they did the Nicene Creed, but the congregation knew it off by heart. The wind blew away my copy that I printed beforehand of the Nicene Creed.
What's the last book you read?
I just finished 2. Can I say 2? The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Mm-hmm. And a book, one of the things that fascinates me is the Civil War. Yeah. And it was actually an Audible, I don't know if that counts, a book called Company H, AYTCH, which is just a foot soldier's observations and experience of the Civil War.
Oh, good. Favorite place to eat in America?
Longhorn. Love Longhorn.
Good stuff, yeah. And last one here. What topping or toppings do you like on your pizza?
Oh, it's got to be pepperoni.
Only pepperoni?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I like it. You're in my family then.
Are you a pepperoni man?
I'm a pepperoni
That's
man.
the way.
I also like a little sausage on it, but that's
interesting.
Debatable. So.
Italian Village in the mall.
Okay, thank you.
That's the place.
I'll go to my grave. It's the best place in Kingsport to get pizza. Yeah. So I'm glad that you said that. So. But man, that's it. So you survived the rapid fire round. So we appreciate you. But no, Rob, seriously, in all candor here, we appreciate you being kind enough to have us in, obviously, to your house, and we thank you for your ministry. And I think people are going to benefit from this to hear you and your stories. So keep up the good fight, brother. I mean, I can't say that enough. So we love you. We appreciate you, what you're doing there at Westminster, and I know they're very, very, very grateful to have you, and I know they're very fortunate to have you there as well. So,
well, thank you, sir, and thank you for having me, and thank you for this ministry, for this podcast. It's, I'm sure it's a blessing, and I'm gonna be listening to it.
Yeah, well, we hope so. That'd be great. Yeah. So, on that note, don't forget, subscribe on YouTube and on Apple Podcast. Make sure you leave us a review. Again, that helps us out so much as far as getting the word out there and what we're doing here at Deeply Rooted. Share it with other people. We'd love to hear from those guys as well, that first-time listeners, long-time listeners, whatever it may be. Again, we're just trying to be obedient to the Lord here and help as many people as we can. Find us on our website, deeplyrootedpodcast.com. Blog post, archived episodes, upcoming ministry schedule, lots to see there. And also find us on our Facebook group page. you can be a part of what we're doing there. We're always throwing out daily inspiration. We're giving you messages that we have here from Deeply Rooted, as well as poll questions from time to time. So you can interact with us there, again, on Deeply Rooted's Facebook page. So until next time, we love you guys and hope you have a great week in Jesus.